Flickering streetlights cast jittery shadows across the deserted lane, leading to a tall iron gate. Past the gate lay a cluster of old houses that time seemed to have forgotten. Their chipped paint and boarded windows testified to years of neglect and a history that the townspeople chose to keep at arm's length. On some nights, an odd hush clung to this lane, a silence so deep it seemed to thrum inside a person's ears, almost strong enough to mask the faint, rasping whispers of secrets waiting to be unearthed. Only a handful of the old homes were still inhabited, and in one of them lived 9-year-old Lucas, a child whose bright-eyed innocence concealed the doorway to a darkness no one suspected. Lucas was an unassuming boy with dusty brown hair and a freckled nose, who spent most afternoons in his bedroom talking to a wooden puppet. The puppet had been a gift from his late grandfather, carved with meticulous care into a figure wearing a pointed hat and a perpetual grin. At first glance, it was just a well-crafted marionette, with beady black eyes and hinged limbs painted a tasteful walnut brown, small enough for Lucas to carry around, but to Lucas it was alive in a way that no one else could comprehend. In the beginning, his mother, Natalie, figured Lucas was just an imaginative child conjuring imaginary friends to stave off loneliness. She'd occasionally stand by the door of his room, listening to him whisper, "Mr. Tick, can you tell that story again?" Then he'd let out a hushed giggle, as though the puppet had answered. Natalie never felt the need to worry. It was harmless, even endearing, until one evening, when Lucas startled them all at the dinner table. He had refused to eat the peas on his plate, choosing instead to place the puppet in his lap. Softly, Lucas said, "Mr. Tick told me something important." His father, Robert, who was often preoccupied with his police work, glanced over with barely disguised amusement. "What did Mr. Tick say this time?" he asked. In a flat, solemn tone, Lucas recited, "Under the orchard's watchful tree, a restless ghost shall soon be free." He spoke as though the words weren't his own. Then he turned the puppet's wooden head in his tiny hands, eyes fixed on it as though waiting for more instructions. Natalie and Robert exchanged concerned looks. They tried to dismiss the riddle-laced statement as the product of a child's overactive imagination, but that evening, a pit of unease settled in Natalie's stomach. Even in the gloom of the dining room, with only a single lamp casting warm light, she sensed the gravity in Lucas's words. Against her better judgment, she asked, "What does it mean?" Lucas shrugged, still peering at the puppet. He didn't say. That night, as she tucked him into bed, Lucas clung to Mr. Tick with surprising intensity, refusing to set it aside. He wore that same subdued, faraway expression. The feeling that something was shifting in the air clung to Natalie long after she turned off the lights. At dawn, the critical phone call awakened Robert. A local orchard caretaker had discovered an unmarked grave beneath an apple tree that had once been the pride of a now abandoned farmland. The caretaker stumbled upon human remains poking through the roots, a shallow pit half hidden by tangled brush. The orchard was only a few miles outside of town. It was also where Robert would spend the rest of his day, standing next to a coroner's van and a small cluster of officers, while the crime scene tape fluttered under the morning breeze. Natalie could barely speak when he told her the news that evening. It was too close to what Lucas had said. They had never heard him mention the orchard before, and it was certainly not something a child should know about. She struggled to let the coincidence pass without question. Yet Natalie felt confusion, perhaps even fear, stifling her attempts to ask her son directly. She didn't want to alarm him, or herself. Meanwhile, Lucas grew quieter over the next few days. He refused to sleep without the puppet perched on the nightstand. He would ask it soft questions as though it were an oracle. Then occasionally he'd hum a lullaby that no one recognized, the tune chilling the air. After hearing that lullaby one too many times, Natalie decided she needed to talk with her son. She found him sitting on the worn rocking chair in the attic, the puppet in his lap. I wanted to ask about what you said the other day," she began. Her voice sounded too careful, riddled with trembling undertones she wished she could hide. "You spoke about an orchard and a restless ghost." Lucas ran a tiny fingertip along the puppet's painted cheek. "You mean the orchard man who got found?" His gaze remained oddly distant. "Yes," she swallowed. How did you, know that? Lucas paused, as though conferring silently with Mr. Tick. He told me, he whispered, eyes darting downward. He shows me things sometimes. It's like I'm inside a room with pictures on the walls, and I see what happened a long time ago. Natalie tried to steady her breathing. We all have dreams, sweetheart. But how did you say it before it happened? Lucas's grip on the puppet tensed. Mr. Tick says people hide bad things in the dark. He says I can help make them right. He's going to give me more riddles. We have to keep listening. Unsettled, Natalie placed a hand on her son's shoulder, feeling his tremble. She hesitated to press further, but curiosity overshadowed her caution. What else did Mr. Tick tell you? Lucas stared at her solemnly. He said, in the home of cardinal drapes and broken floorboards, a second hush demands a chord. She repeated the line to herself, trying to make sense of it. It felt more cryptic than the orchard message, but no less ominous. She walked away from the attic, uncertain of what steps to take, mind trapped in a cycle of doubt and half-rational reassurance. Perhaps it was meaningless. Perhaps it would amount to nothing. A week later, a neighbor reported a foul stench from an abandoned bakery at the far end of town. The old structure, once bright and bustling with red curtains, had been closed for years after multiple code violations. A local reporter tagged along with the responding officers, filming the event. They found the remains of a missing vagrant in the run-down cellar below, the skeletal body bound with coarse rope. The walls still bore tattered drapes, a once vibrant cardinal red, now dulled with dust and mold. The floorboards above had rotted and collapsed. It was exactly what Lucas, or Mr. Tick, had described. By the time Robert returned home that night, the eerie parallels had become impossible to dismiss. Together, the parents confronted Lucas, though gently, as if worried they might trigger something unknown. The boy's eyes shone with a pale reflection of fear. He clung to the puppet like a shield. Mr. Tick's riddles are not done, he told them. There's more. It's a puzzle. Each riddle leads to something else. Now Robert, ever the pragmatic law officer, felt torn between the rational explanation he sought and the unsettling mystery confronting him through his own child. How was this boy discovering the site of concealed crime? Had he heard something from adult conversations he shouldn't have? Or was there something truly uncanny about Mr. Tick's powers? Despite his reservations, Robert realized he had to probe deeper. He took a few personal days from work, wanting to keep a close eye on his family. He would watch Lucas play with Mr. Tick in the backyard, noticing the child's lips moving as he appeared to listen. By the time Robert approached him, though, Lucas would fall silent. One late afternoon, Robert and Natalie were in the living room when they heard a shrill squeal. They dashed to the backyard to find Lucas kneeling in the grass, tears streaming down his face. The puppet lay on the ground, twisted in an awkward position, as though it had been flung aside. When Natalie scooped the puppet up, Lucas cried out, "No! Don't touch him! Don't make him angry!" "Why are you upset?" Robert asked quietly. Lucas wiped his face, trembling. "He showed me something else. Something worse." His eyes flashed with confusion. "I saw flames, and there's a house on the outskirts near the forest," he said. "A mother's guilt lies in bitter flame. Turn the key or face the same." Natalie glanced at Robert, panic brimming in her eyes. "Lucas, is that all he told you?" she coaxed gently. Nodding, Lucas struggled to catch his breath. "It was like I was trapped, watching this screaming woman as she tried to hide a box. Then, red and orange everywhere." He looked at them, voice cracking. He said, "I have to show you so you could make it right." Curiosity and dread wrestled inside Robert. He recognized the location described by Lucas. At the town's perimeter, backed by a thick swath of forest, stood a decrepit house rumored to be haunted. Years ago, it had been set ablaze in what local gossip described as a tragic accident, though no consensus emerged on the culprit or reason. The mother who once lived there died in the flames, and the father and daughter moved away. Soon afterward, the place became the local bogeyman story for children. With a sickening gut feeling, Robert realized They had yet another location that matched a Riddle's description. He decided to investigate, but not as an official policeman, though he kept his badge with him for access. Natalie insisted she come along. They brought Lucas, if only because they suspected the puppet's riddles would continue, and, in a twisted sense, Lucas was the key to understanding them. That evening they drove to the charred remains of the old house. Overhead the sky had turned a bruised violet, night lurking at the edges. The front yard was a graveyard of blackened wood. Parts of the roof had caved in years ago, and black scorch marks lined what remained of the siding. The door stood partially off its hinges, the interior of the house a labyrinth of cinder and ash. An uneasy hush settled around them as they approached. With flashlight beams flickering over the soot-stained floors, they advanced slowly. Lucas clung to Mr. Tick, whispering under his breath. The boards creaked under every step. Robert scanned the corners with the practiced caution of a trained officer. Natalie was the first to notice it, a tarnished key lying on a windowsill among shards of glass. She picked it up, turning it over in her hand. Lucas's voice echoed. "Turn the key or face the same." Robert guided them to what remained of the hallway. Wind moaned through the collapsed rafters, scattering soot that danced in the flashlight glow. Each new step felt like an intrusion into a place brimming with unspoken anguish. At the far end of what might have been the living room, they discovered an old chest, partially hidden under fallen beams and debris. Kindling their nerves, they pried away the debris until the chest was visible enough to attempt unlocking. The key, astonishingly, fit perfectly. Inside lay a set of yellowed journals, pages crinkled by age and water damage. Natalie flipped one open to find spidery handwriting. "I can't live with this guilt anymore. He forced me. I tried to protect her." Another entry hinted at a violent figure who manipulated the mother into covering up certain wrongs. The final words on the last page read, "I set the fire to end it all, so none of his secrets would remain. If you find this, forgive me." The pages reeked of regret and desperation. Robert's breath hitched as he recognized some of the confessions referencing forced compliance in a series of crimes, acts, neither fully spelled out nor entirely disguised. The father of this broken family had coerced the mother into being an accomplice. The question now was, to what? As they stood in that smoldered corridor, Lucas stared into the puppet's eyes as though enthralled. Then, scarcely audible, he recited, "He's watching from the shadows. The puzzle is not complete. More names remain, more stories to sever the illusions here." The child's voice echoed around the burned interior, as if it were no longer just Lucas speaking. Later that night, Robert pored over the journals while Natalie coaxed Lucas to bed. Their bedroom lamp cast a pallid glow across the notebooks. The mother's cryptic writing referred to hush money and disposal of bodies like the orchard. She mentioned hidden compartments, bribed officials. Even the puppet's second riddle about the old bakery correlated with the idea that certain dirty tasks had, at one point, fallen to local business owners. Robert felt dizzy tracing each line, realizing a broad network of concealed offenses might lie beneath the tranquil veneer of their small town. Since the last page offered no explicit list of conspirators, it became clear that the only real roadmap they had were the puppet's riddles, and that meant they either had to accept a supernatural phenomenon or some improbable advantage gleaned from a child's bizarre channel. Doubt warred with necessity, but the pattern was impossible to ignore. The next morning, Robert took a moment alone with Lucas. The boy sat cross-legged on the floor, puppet in his hands. Robert, voice low, asked, "Is Mr. Tick telling you something new?" Lucas nodded. He said, "Seek the final mask behind the library wall, where silent watchers heed the call." His brow furrowed. "I don't know what that means." Robert swallowed. His fatherly instincts demanded he protect Lucas from anything more, but the policeman in him insisted this was the key to unearthing something bigger. He looked into the puppet's painted face. Its small, carved smile seemed to mock him. That wooden grin made cold fear prickle his neck. Yet, he turned back to Lucas and whispered, "Okay, we'll follow it." The old library in town was a grand stone building with arching windows and heavy oak doors. Inside, the shelves climbed high, stuffed with aging volumes that filled the air with the scent of musty paper. It was Sunday, so only a handful of patrons lingered at the desks. Robert and Natalie led Lucas through the quiet aisles. Outside, a steady drizzle tapped on the windows, adding a hushed percussion to the tension. They found the portion of the building that archival records designated as the oldest, an alcove, near the reference section. The puppet clutched to Lucas's chest, felt like a dark talisman. With no immediate clue where to look, they scanned the walls for any sign of a hidden passage. One large portrait stood out, its subject a severe-looking woman, once a library benefactor from the 19th century. Natalie gently pushed at the edges of the frame, searching for a hint of a latch. Sure enough, there was a faint click, and the portrait swung open like a door, revealing a recess in the wall. Inside that narrow recess, they discovered a series of meticulously typed blackmail letters, none addressed or signed explicitly, but referencing high-level local officials, store owners, and a network of quiet enforcers. Pages upon pages of records spanning decades were stacked, detailing hush money transactions, cover-ups for murders, and disposal methods. It was a spider's web of corruption that went beyond a single family or generation. Robert recognized the names of people still in positions of influence. Suddenly, the orchard corpse and the bakery skeleton were small tiles in a much larger mosaic. Natalie's hands shook as she read. These documents, they are enough to blow this entire town's secrets wide open. This is horrifying. Lucas's breathing quickened, and Robert moved to put a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. But Lucas flinched. In that moment, the puppet's eyes seemed impossibly to glimmer with malevolent satisfaction in the dim library light. Lucas pressed his face into the puppet, whispering something they couldn't catch. Soon, footsteps approached. A stern-faced librarian glared at them. "That area is for authorized personnel," she whispered harshly. Before Robert could produce his badge, the woman looked past them, saw the hidden stash of papers, and her face drained of color. She stammered, as though she recognized the significance of these documents. Robert's policeman instincts kicked in. With a quick flash of his credential, he explained they had probable cause to examine them. He insisted no one else be allowed near without law enforcement present. The librarian, shaky and pale, eventually complied. That night, local authorities, some of whom were mentioned in the blackmail files, descended upon the library, feigning ignorance. Robert, suspicious and guarded, kept copies hidden, anticipating some might try to cover this up. He instructed a trusted colleague from a neighboring county to secure the originals. If any of the implicated individuals realized how close the net was, Lucas's entire family might be in danger. At home, tensions coiled tight. Lucas paced his room with Mr. Tick, eyes locked on the puppet. He would mutter, half hysterically, about how the puppet needed the puzzle finished. He seemed frightened of disobeying, as if the puppet were a living tyrant. At one point, Natalie heard him whisper, "But what if I don't want to see more?" A stabbing sorrow tore at her. She wanted to snatch the puppet away, burn it, do anything to break its hold on her son. But the riddles had led them to do good, to expose criminals. Could she truly risk stopping it now? That was when the phone rang near midnight. Robert, wide awake, fumbled for the receiver. A gravelly voice barked, "Back off! Put those files back or your boy disappears!" The line went dead. Instantly, Robert and Natalie realized that not only were they dealing with hidden crimes, but there were still powerful masterminds at large, desperate to bury the truth forever. Lucas, hearing the commotion, wandered into the living room holding his puppet. His cheeks glistened with tears. "I don't want anything bad to happen," he murmured. "Mr. Tick says it's almost over. He says we can't stop now." Fearing for their son's safety, Robert made arrangements with a different law enforcement office to temporarily relocate the family, at least until official charges could be filed against those implicated. Several unmarked police cars waited outside to escort them to a safer location. But while they were gathering their things, Lucas suddenly disappeared from the living room. A wave of panic shot through Natalie. She rushed upstairs. The bedroom was empty, the window open, curtains fluttering in the night air. Heart pounding, Robert and Natalie sprinted outside, the officers fanning out, searching. A frantic hour passed as flashlights combed the darkness. Then, near the edge of the yard, they found fresh footprints leading into the neighbor's overgrown lot, which abutted a thicket of trees. They followed the tracks, calling Lucas's name again and again. Voices raw. Deeper and deeper into the wooded area they went. At last, a faint glow emerged between the trunks. It was Lucas, standing with Mr. Tick in a small clearing, illuminated by the moonlight. The boy was trembling violently. Beside him, a hooded figure stood, brandishing a steel blade with the menacing threat that if anyone came closer, they'd harm Lucas. The figure barked, "Hand over the files, destroy them. This ends now." Robert held his hands up, trying to keep the assailant calm. "No one has to get hurt," he said, voice quivering with urgency. "Let Lucas go." Lucas, tears streaming, clung to the puppet. Suddenly the child spoke, but the cadence was unnatural, the voice almost beyond his own. "The puzzle is complete," he announced. It sounded eerie, as though words resonated from within the wooden figure pressed to his chest. Then, in a single fluid motion, Lucas let go of Mr. Tick. The puppet fell to the ground with a low thud. The assailant's eyes flickered toward it, distracted, and in a split second, Robert lunged. A meltdown of shouts and movement erupted, an officer tackling the hooded figure before they could slash at Lucas. Natalie rushed forward, scooping up her son, who sobbed into her arms. Police pinned the assailant to the ground, forcing the weapon away. The clearing was soon a tangle of uniformed bodies and harshly cast flashlight beams. As the figure was dragged away, cursing and spewing threats, the adrenaline that had sustained them subsided, leaving the family trembling. Lucas glanced down at Mr. Tick's wooden face in the moonlight. The puppet lay prone on the grass, its blank eyes staring up. He sucked in a shaky breath and whispered to Natalie, "Do we still need it?" She held him tight. Robert knelt beside the puppet, turning its carved head. For a moment, he thought he saw a crack in the veneer, like a faint wound along the puppet's cheek. "No," Robert finally said, voice hushed. "We have what we need now." In the weeks that followed, multiple arrests were made. The blackmail ring was exposed, linking various murders and cover-ups spanning decades. Robert handed over every shred of evidence to external agencies, ensuring the implicated officials faced investigation. The orchard bones were identified, the bakery victim given a name. Eventually, the mother's final confession, from that charred house, was revealed. The town was forced to confront its grim legacy. Though it wouldn't heal overnight, the revelations ended a circle of silence that had allowed evil to fester. As for Lucas, the nightmares persisted for a time, but each day grew a bit brighter. He no longer glued himself to Mr. Tick. Natalie found the puppet stuffed inside a box in the attic, covered in an old cloth. She lifted it gently, studying its inert form, and felt a chill at how something so lifeless had held so much power over them. She considered destroying it outright, but the memory of how it had helped them solve so many tragedies stopped her. Instead, she placed it in a locked trunk to gather dust. Occasionally, Lucas would ask, "Do you think Mr. Tick is gone for good?" And Robert or Natalie would reassure him that no matter what uncanny force resided in that carved wood, its purpose had been fulfilled. Over time, the boy's questioning subsided. He began to play normally with friends, run in the backyard, and return to the child's world he'd nearly lost. Yet sometimes, Natalie would see Lucas pause at the attic door, as though listening for a faint call. She'd slip her arm around him, guiding him gently away, reminding him he was safe. And though in broad daylight everything seemed normal, late at night, when the house was quiet and the wind rattled the windows, she wondered if the puppet still longed to speak. If it did, the trunk remained locked and no one ventured close. The echoes of its last riddle lingered in the air, testaments to the hidden wrongs it had forced into view. The puppet's riddles had unraveled a dark tapestry, minds warped by greed, families destroyed by secrets, and a town nearly strangled by its own silence. Yet they had also birthed a new beginning. Lucas slept more peacefully, hugging a simple stuffed bear each night instead of the wooden marionette with the painted grin. Whatever sins had festered were now dragged into the light of day, confronted and judged. And though no one could deny the uncanny intervention of that silent puppet, it was the unwavering courage of a frightened child that ensured those riddles found their conclusion. On quiet evenings, Robert sometimes caught himself reflecting on the orchard, the bakery's cellar, that scorched house, and how a bizarre string of cryptic phrases led them to extraordinary discoveries. His rational mind still stumbled over the idea, uncertain whether to interpret it as a ghostly presence or some deeper psychic phenomenon. Ultimately, it no longer mattered. The truth was free and justice was finally being served. After the final arrests were made and the trials began, the puppet was seldom mentioned again. Whenever someone asked how the family discovered the crimes, Robert or Natalie would provide a brief, pragmatic explanation, careful not to mention the puppet's riddles in detail. Even if they did, few would believe it. The official version would remain that dedicated sleuthing, combined with an anonymous tip, led to the evidence. And that was enough for the larger public. But in a small, unspoken corner of the family's life, the memory of Mr. Tick would never be erased. Lucas at night still sometimes dreamt of the puppet's carved grin, accompanied by riddles dancing in his mind. When those nightmares came, he would crawl into his parents' bed seeking comfort. Natalie would hold him close, reminding him that it was over. Yet, in the back of her mind, a dark seed of wonder took hold. Was a power so potent ever truly over? Or was it merely dormant, waiting for another dark secret to emerge, another puzzle to solve? Lucas never asked to see Mr. Tick again, and his parents never brought it up. Life moved forward. The orchard grew wildflowers over its reopened soil. The bakery building was demolished, and the blackened house at the forest's edge stood as a silent monument to past crimes. And in a dusty attic trunk, a wooden puppet lay in darkness, its painted eyes closed to the world, until the day someone dared to lift the lid again.